It's got to be the biggest problem in Africa is that the Africa's past is passed down from one generation to another. It's not written down. Some of it is written down, but most of it is not written down. And like what you uncovered, I don't know whether it was from historians here in the UK or from researchers somewhere who wrote, especially India, for example, the slave trade, that route to India. We're talking about, well, the 3rd or 4th century. This thing has been happening. And even within the African communities, where the chiefs and kings and all those used to be part of this, the slave trade as well. And very few, even in our libraries, in our schools, you can't get this information. Where do you get this information from?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of questions in what you've raised.
I know. Yeah.
I mean, the odd thing is that all of this has been written about for a long time.
Okay, it's existing, yeah.
It's existing. There's nothing that I dug up that hasn't been carefully documented over a very long period of time. Just to go back to another point you raised about the non-written nature of African history. Of course, one of the great problems is that the only sub-Saharan country that had a written language was, of course, Ethiopia.
Yeah.
They had Ge'ez, which is the language of the church, and they wrote down a huge amount about their own past. So they can say, our past is this, that, or the other. For the rest, say a place like Zambia or Malawi or somewhere, you really have to, you can go back to, shall we say, the missionary period, the colonial period.
Yeah.
They wrote certain things down. Beyond that, it wasn't really written. So you then are left with people's memories, some of which are very accurate, some of which are not accurate. I mean, we all know about ourselves. We aren't always right about what we remember.
Yeah.
But then we're into anthropology and we're into mythology, and those things are all valuable assets in trying to understand what goes on, because nobody understands everything about their past.
Yeah. But then, the thing is, to come back to the future, the suggestion of what happened in the past and where Africa is heading is one of those areas that my colleagues and I, whatever we do in the media, is something that we're trying to
Sure,
to
of
see.
course.
And okay, where are we heading? Any ideas on?
Well, I think we can only look at what are the trends that shape us.
Yeah.
Nobody has a crystal ball. Well, I certainly don't. So I've always, I was, shall we say, in my hunches, I've been wrong so often. I was wrong about the fall of the Berlin Wall. I didn't think the Soviet Union would collapse. Yeah. I didn't think that, President Trump would beat Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
I must say, look, I'm from South Africa originally, and I thought that apartheid was so powerful, it would last my whole lifetime. Yeah. And then it collapsed. And so there are a lot of things that you can be very unsure about and not really know why these things happen. Yeah. Because there's one thing you've got to be careful of. Let's say that you're an expert, shall we say, on, I don't know, Nigeria, for argument's sake. Yeah. You've spent your whole life working on Nigeria, and there are a lot of pressures building up. What do? You draw on your past, and you say, well, look, in all of these situations, this is what's always happened. Yeah. That's most likely to happen at the moment. And you're, of course, right. Yeah. 99% of the time. There's one time when you're wrong. And you're the worst person to ask. Yeah. It's the moment when there's an absolutely huge divide in the society and things change dramatically. So, for example, the end of apartheid, nobody really expected it when it happened. Yeah. And the people who knew most about South Africa were the worst people to ask, because they said, it'll never happen. It'll never happen. It's never happened. It won't happen. So it's the people who know most are the worst people to ask when it comes to those major changes. Yeah. Most of the time they're right.
But I think some of us in other parts of Africa, we knew the change would come in South Africa. But the thing is, because we felt the changing times and the pressure inside South Africa, South Africans themselves didn't actually know that the world outside was putting too much pressure on the politicians. They couldn't almost go anywhere. They were sort of, okay, the West had supported them, But in other parts, even of the West, in Switzerland and so on, there was too much pressure on them. So there was that bit of back of our heads that it was going to happen. But those within...
I don't agree with you.
Yeah, really?
And I'll tell you why. I mean, listen, I don't want to get bogged down in South Africa, but, you know, I'll tell you why. Because at the time of the end of apartheid, the South African economy, which was run by whites, was strong. The army, which was run by whites, was strong. There was no problem with the army. The electorate, the white electorate, purely white electorate, no black person had a vote. Do you know that in the 1930s, black people had the vote? They took it away. I mean, it's the most shameful thing that ever happened. But so the electorate was voting for the government. Why do they need to change?
No, the thing is, when I talk about the pressure, because then we'll be covering South Africa instead of covering the continent.
I know.
But the pressure which was outside, because I remember during Idi Amin's government, we had a lot of ANC people who came in as refugees. Idi Amin had brought so many, and somewhere Okozi Mpozi, I think something of that nature with the ANC, and there were a number being trained in Uganda, others were in Angola and other parts of Africa. But then again, people were saying an armed struggle was not an issue. The issue should be the trade issue, the way they are trying to block Russia now, and you know.
Look, I don't want to go into South Africa. Let me just make one point, and then let's leave it, because otherwise we can spend the whole hour on this. Every single initiative to change South Africa failed. Everyone. It was only the collective that won. It was because there was pressure outside, there was economic pressure, and there was pressure inside. Young men and women went onto the streets in South Africa and were prepared to die rather than change. But even that would have failed if they didn't have all the other pressures. It was the total one that came together. Anyway, look, this is not our subject. I was just mentioning it.
I more or less look at, first of all, the book. Secondly, the changing in the 21st century, what is changing now, and your past experience having worked at the BBC Africa service. There's a lot that you've seen. I know you're retired now, but there's a lot that you have seen over the years, and a lot has even happened. Even the BBC now is doing a lot of cuts, and there's a lot going on. People have lost their jobs, their money is not coming in a way. It's like the BBC is changing direction. Everybody used to watch and think it's the BBC, the big, you know. But now things are changing.
Absolutely right.
There are lots of job cuts. I've got a couple of friends who are no longer there. And there is a lot that is changing. So it's no longer putting that too much focus on the African continent as it used to be, because other players have come in. Al Jazeera, CNN not so much, but Al Jazeera and the Chinese have come in, you know. So that is another area that has changed the way reporting is happening on the African continent. And in the future, I don't know where we're heading as far as that's concerned. Will we still be getting better information from the BBC, you think?
I think it will remain there, you know, but the problem is, I suppose, the overall status of Britain in the world, which is declining. You know, Britain was a huge power, and it is a smaller power than it once was. It's not nothing, but it's not as powerful as it once was. And you know, the other powers are now bigger. And then you get someone like Trump who arrives, and suddenly he has cut all of their budget to their broadcasting, some of which was excellent. So you can't predict what's going to happen.
Exactly, you can't.
While as the Chinese, for example, have put huge amounts of money into it. Russia today is now very big. They put a lot of money into that as well. But you know, if Putin left, they might cut it all.
Everything might go back.
You can't predict where it's going.
Anything can happen.
But the one thing I would say is, I personally am. I believe in African journalism, and I believe in African journalists. I think they are brave, capable, and you know, they know what's going on in their patch. You can't fool ordinary people.
What's the most memorable thing you have about the continent, and having worked there and having done that? The most memorable one, say, look, we covered Kwame Nkrumah, or we did this or that. There has to be something memorable.
There are a few. I mean, I think it was I was in Liberia when there was a coup with Prince Johnson. It's a long time ago. I can't remember much about it, but that was pretty dramatic. I was there.
Sergeant Doe.
That's right. And then I was I went into Eritrea when it was fighting the Ethiopians for liberation. I went in there twice.
Okay.
I came under shell fire. I was bombed from the air. I could see the guns from the town of Keren firing up at the trenches. And do you know that those trenches that the Eritreans were dug into?
Yeah.
Who built them?
No.
They were built by the Italians as they were trying to defend Keren from the British, who were coming from Sudan in the Second World War to kick the Italians out of Eritrea, to put Haile Selassie back on the throne in Ethiopia. So you know the history of Africa is even in the ground, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. Okay. So when we look at our history, and to go back to the book and to see what the chiefs and kings did over the years, you said most of this is documented, but in Africa, if you're trying to do research on slave trade, trust me, some of this information is not there. The chiefs, for example, who led their own people into enslavement, because they used to run and capture certain villages, and then you end up selling them to the Arabs and so on. This information is coming out now. The thing is, how is this going to really shape? I know we've tried to answer this before. How is this really going to shape when it suddenly becomes enlarged in Africa? Even the one you've mentioned in South Africa, that it did really happen there. But very little knowledge is known with the South Africans about this.
Let me answer it. You know, if you look at the shape of most of the conflict that is now in Africa, by numbers, you'll see that it mostly lies in the Sahelian belt between, shall we say, Mauritania and Ethiopia.
Yeah.
That band across there. There are other areas of conflict, but that is one of the big ones. And also, that point is exactly the point at which the Arabs came south after the arrival of Islam in about 700, when they crossed from the Arabian Peninsula into Egypt. They then move along North Africa. They go into Spain and Portugal, but they also then come down south. They converted the Berbers, and then they established these trade routes across the Sahara. And those trade routes crisscrossed the whole of the Sahara, and people were taken in their tens of thousands northwards to serve their Arab masters. And you can say that in some ways they still are. I mean, if you go to Sudan today, the conflict between the African population and the Arab population is terrible, and people still are called slaves, abdi, by the Arabs, and they are. I mean, I have met people in South Sudan who said to me, when we got to 13 or 14, we had to leave our village and walk from the border with Chad all the way to Ethiopia to join the SPLA in fighting the North. Because if we didn't leave, they would kill us.
Or take us as slaves,
And these were young people. They were all the boys, between 10, 20, 30 of them would walk. And I said, how did you walk? He said, well, we just walked. Some of them were eaten by hyenas. Some of them died of snake bite. Some of them died of starvation. But about 20 out of a 25 or 30 got there.
Destination,
and then they fought with the SPLA against the North. So this is, and they didn't even think it was special. They said everybody did it.
Everybody's doing it.
So these things are deep in people's consciousness. But the one thing you can't do is erase the past. So, for example, I talk about, say, 5,000-year history, because the first actual concrete evidence that we have of enslavement is on the Nile. If you go into the Nile, on the second cataract, there's an etching on the Nile which shows Africans from Sudan or Ethiopia, we don't know. It was Nubia at the time.
Nubia.
Being brought up the Nile, or down the Nile, depending how you look at it, to Egypt.
Southern Sudan, all the way up to
No, not from southern Sudan. From Sudan.
From Sudan itself.
All the way up the Nile. And they were there to serve the pharaohs. And that went on for centuries after centuries. There are still photographs that you can find today of these etchings showing it, and there's no doubt about it. Now, I just want to make one thing clear.
Yeah.
Everything I'm saying is not designed to deny what Britain, France, Portugal did in the transatlantic slave trade.
I was coming to that.
All that is true. I don't want anybody to think that I'm denying anything. It's all true.
Yeah. The thing is all that is written, of course, Britain and the others agreed eventually, and they ended the slave trade.
Yes.
And that is well documented, and we all understand that. The question is the presence which really disturbs most of us. And when I asked a friend today, when I said, look, I'm going to interview you, and part of it is to do with, and he was saying me, no, find out something about the African leaders. How would he know what the African leaders are trying to do? How would you change the continent at the moment? Because things haven't changed for the last 60, 70 years. We've got wrong leaders coming in with money being stolen up, and there is always a finger being pointed at the West. Or they're the ones stealing our wealth, or they haven't paid repatriation, they haven't done. Every question seems to come from there, and they forget that they've got their own leaders in office. Do you see any pattern changing over the next maybe century?
Maybe, but let's come to that. Let me just outline, in a sense, what it was that made African slavery so special. Because there were, if you look at just the Atlantic slavery and not the Indian Ocean slavery, the other thing people forget is there was many people were taken across the Indian Ocean as were taken across the Atlantic.
But the numbers were not the same.
They were.
They were, really?
There's about 12.5 million, I mean it's a few 100,000 less, but it makes no difference. 12.5 million were taken across the Atlantic to the Caribbean, to Brazil, and to the Americas. Exactly the same number were taken across the Indian Ocean, up to Arabia, into Iraq, Iran, into the what was then the Ottoman Empire. 1.5 million people were taken to the Ottoman Empire. People don't know about this.
The question is, not so many, as you're saying, people don't know so much about that, because I also read that recently, and when I was doing a bit of research and found that the numbers are there. But the thing is unlike in Americans, the numbers are still there in America of, say, for example, the Africans multiplying over the years. But in India, the cities are not that many. And secondly, you can't find these, you had slaves going to China, even as far away as Japan, or even Indonesia. Those countries had slaves.
They were.
But the thing is, there are no black people there anymore.
But one's got to look. We're moving around very fast. But I mean, let's just talk about the way in which they went to India, and then we'll do a little bit on China and Japan. Because the Indian troops were only taken. They took men because they wanted fighting troops, and they only bought men. So as soon as they arrived in India, they knew, if I'm going to survive and I'm going to have a family, I've got to find an Indian woman. So they soon gradually became Indian. Now there are, as you say, still some groups in India and Pakistan who still say we are African. And if you look at them, you can see they're African. And they still use
they've got cities there.
Exactly.
People, they call cities.
Cities, that's right. And they still use African some languages and some musical instruments.
Exactly, culture,
But then some were taken on to China and to Indonesia and into Japan. But they were not taken as a mass of, not the tens, hundreds of thousands. We're talking about a few people. They were taken as, shall we say, trophies or gifts. Because it was so extraordinary to see somebody who looked like an African in Indonesia. I mean, there was, for example, in an Indonesian wedding, they would sometimes have shall we say, an Indonesian girl with a very white skin and an African girl with a black skin. They'd call them the sun and the moon, and they'd carry some symbols. That's how they were used. But I'm not suggesting for a moment that they were the kind of large numbers. The large numbers were used in Zanzibar by the Omanis, and they were used to pick cloves, or on the sugar cane of Reunion, which they were used by the French. And the French bought them from the Omanis. The Omanis went deep into Africa. They went so deep into Africa they arrived on the coast of Angola. Now, can you imagine walking all the way?
Yeah.
Some of the people who would be involved in these convoys, sending people across, would take 2 or 3 years taking them back.
Just crossing.
Yeah, and the men would wear coffles. They would wear the collars around their necks, and carry tusks.
Tusks, elephant tusks.
And the women would carry babies, and they would also be chained, and they would be. And it was said that so many died on that route, you could smell the route. It had rotting corpses everywhere. That is the reality of what was happening, with the going all the way to Zanzibar and then sold on to Arabia, to Reunion, and up to India. So that is that element. But if I can go back to your question, which was about the role of the chiefs. I've mentioned the role of the pharaohs in the Nile. But if you look at what actually, when you think about it, what did the Portuguese do when they began in 1440 or around then to come down Africa? They didn't establish colonies. They established forts. The Portuguese, the French, the Danish, the British,
even the English,
had forts, which they got permission, or sometimes
from
they threatened
from the chief,
from the local chief,
or they took the land by force.
They took only. They didn't take a colony. They took a tiny foothold. And then they traded. They traded for horses. They traded for Indian cloth. Interestingly, it was an Indian cloth that they brought and sold to Africans. They brought beads, and they brought guns and liquor. That's what they used to trade with. And they traded with local people. And very often what they would also do is they would take the chief's son hostage.
For the chief can exchange.
Exactly, until he came up with a number of slaves. And it was the chiefs that did the deals.
I want us to come back to the 21st century. You've worked in Africa. You've seen African politicians and what is going on. I know it's not an area that you are so keen on, but it's one area that you have worked, of course, at the World Service. You're looking at Africa today, and you're looking at the money that's leaving the continent in terms of corruption, bribes here and there, and all that. When you look at it, especially, I consider you an African, because you're born in Africa, you're an African. How can the continent move from the past that we are talking about to come into the reality of the 21st century and have leaders who are really interested in leading their countries to prosperity?
Well, I think there's only one way forward, and that is through a democratic process. You must be able to hold your people to account. Now, of course, that is not the model that has been adopted in China, but leaving aside the Chinese model, and that is quite a special one, because there aren't many other examples where you can say that a country has developed without democracy. But the rest of the world has developed along democratic lines, and they've done so by being able to say to the leaders, if you don't act on the behalf of our people, we will get rid of you. And that, I think, has been the greatest strength of the democratic system. I remember I can remember back in the 1960s when Africa had only just become, should we say, the African countries had really only just become independent. And people said, it's going to take Africa a long time to learn about democracy. I always thought this was nonsense. I have never met an African who didn't understand democracy in about 2 seconds. Because everybody can understand, I control my own future, you want to be my king, my ruler, my chief, whatever. Well, if I can't control you, everybody understands where power is and who has the power. That's not difficult to understand. It doesn't matter what the system is. And after all, there were democratic systems in Africa before colonialism. Where chiefs were answerable in some way to their people. And the great sadness now is that quite a lot of those traditional systems have been undermined or corrupted, and that people now don't listen to their people. And that, I think, is very, very sad.
It is quite sad, but then at the end of the day, the structures are such that when one man grabs power, constitutions are made, and all these issues where they said, okay, 2 terms, 3 terms, the age limit, all these things have been written down and there. And then a man comes in, everything is taken over. He has the parliament at power, and so on. So this, whatever you're going to do, it's very, very difficult to get that person out of the way so that you continue. Now, this is where we keep thinking, okay, no matter how much you're going to put these things down, it's still going to be impossible to get that man out of that seat. People have tried so many times, and it has always go. If he has the army, he has the power. It's going to be very difficult. So it's like, even if we talk about unity, it's going to be very, very difficult to have 4 or 5 countries united when you fail to make it in your own countries. And that's why we keep thinking, okay, should we get the West to come back in at some point?
Goodness me, absolutely not. I have never been in favor of colonialism. I think colonialism was a mistake. And there are plenty of older Africans that I used to meet who say, when the British were here, we had books in the schools, we had drugs in the health clinics. Won't the British come back? And I used to say, first of all, I don't think that's the way forward, and secondly, it's not going to happen. So we just must move on. That's not an issue. And there were bad British administrators. There were good ones. I'm not trying to defend Britain. That's not my role. But I think that there is a genuine trend, and you can see it, of people moving into business across Africa, doing well, and out of that, they will gradually, use if you look at how did people move away from dictatorship in Britain to democracy, and partly it was that people began to acquire financial wealth, and then gradually financial wealth turned into political wealth. And when it was wide enough spread, then everybody, the power cascaded down.
Could we say education? Because with more educated people...
Education is always a good idea, but you can have educated dictatorships too, believe you me. Look at Sri Lanka. They had tremendously educated population and terrible dictatorships. So there is no guarantee that you're going to have a good system. You have to fight for your system. And I'm not saying you have to take up guns, but working on democracy is a constant issue. And here in Britain, I'm involved in politics. I've always been involved in politics at a very, very, very low level. But I believe in it, and I believe that even if I'm trying to elect a local councillor in one little part of London, it's important, because if people can't have their voice heard, they're going to find other ways of getting at you. So, but I believe in the end, I believe in Martin Luther King's famous remark that the arc of history bends towards justice, and it does.
Yeah, it does. It's the change which is becoming an issue, and I always ask this: if you're made a president of Ghana, for example, or Uganda, at this moment, what would you do?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't take the job. But
you wouldn't take the job.
if I had to take the job, then I think what I would do is to try to look at the way in which power, if I had the power, that power can be distributed, because power does not have to rest in one person's hands. There is a huge amount of influence that can be spread. For example, I remember when Yoweri Museveni came to power. I was in Kampala, I think a week or 2 weeks after he came to power.
1987, 86, I
haven't forgotten it. Every place was shot to pieces. And I remember him going to the
parliament,
but I remember going to the Organization of African Union when it was before the African Union. And he said, this is just a club of dictators. Well, didn't he join it? But what happened then was surely that the power which the North had exercised through the army was shifted to the South or the center of the country. And the North was then left without anything. What did they do? you got the Lord's Resistance Army.
Oh, yeah.
Which was just the worst group of people I think I have ever. I interviewed people who had women who had been taken as children by the
Lord Resistance
LRA.
Army, yeah.
And what they did to them and what they had to do, you don't know.
I know. I spoke to one of the young girls. I think she was taken when she was 13 or 14, and by the time she got away, I think 6-7 years later, she was 18 and had about 4 babies and 5 babies. Others had died, you know. And
absolutely.
And she didn't even know who the fathers of the kids were and was being raped. I mean, it was quite a big shame of what happened. But we condemn all these things, and it becomes a nightmare for us, and that's why we keep asking questions. Said, look,
of course,
is there something really that we can foresee? And as you're saying, it's difficult to foresee what's going to happen next, because now we are looking at Congo. There is this, there is that. A small thing like this can generate something, and it destroys everything. Do you think the tribal system that we have, like as we talked about Somalia, has, to a certain extent, if we can control 2 or 3 or 5 tribes can get together, there can be some kind of unity that could spring up and maybe save the rest of the continent?
Well, it can, but you know, the tribal or clan system comes from another era.
Yeah.
And while, as you know, I certainly would always be respectful of clan leaders or tribal leaders or elders, because of you know, they very often embody a lot of wisdom, and they are the traditional holders of the tradition of the people,
of the cultures of the clan. Yeah.
Exactly. So I wouldn't ever just dismiss them. Now I think,
but isn't that holding in South Africa? I think.
South Africa,
with the Zulus and other tribes. No, because
you're right, of course.
With the Zulus and other tribes, which, you know, there is always that element of, okay, what are the Zulus saying? Because they're looking at the Zulus as, you know, one of the major tribes in South Africa, and there is always that a fellowship that is there, regardless of changes that have happened over, you know, Julius Malema coming up and all the others coming up. But there's still that element which is holding South Africa together.
Or keeping it apart, because it's also, you know, it depends. I mean, for example, I remember many years ago being given a lift by a Zulu lady, and we were driving through the night to get somewhere. Eventually I said to her, what's the difference between you and, fundamentally, and the Xhosa people of the Eastern Cape?
Yeah.
And she said, well, first of all, the Xhosa people are not real men, because they're circumcised.
Okay.
Right? That's the first thing she said.
Yeah.
The second thing she said, they ran away. What she means is that Mfokane, which people forget about, you know the Mfokane?
Mfokane,
or Difokane, depending on what you... I mean, where perhaps 1 million people were displaced by Shaka and his people. I mean, some of the people who ended up in Zimbabwe
and Malawi and Zambia, these areas.
Exactly. Yeah. And you know, and the people, the Matabele, who took the land from the Shona. You then have to ask yourself, why did people vote for Mugabe in Zimbabwe? A lot of it came back down to the Shona was still angry that their west, or the whole of the west of what became Zimbabwe, had been taken by the Matabele. And people, that's why people forget, you know, it wasn't only the whites who invaded Zimbabwe. The Zulu, who in the Matabele were Zulu. You know, they'd done it too. So these things have long, deep roots. That's why Africa is so complicated. You can't just, there's nothing simple about Africa.
I know. And the thing is it's all a question of, when you sit there and you feel helplessly, I think, what can I do? There is that element always there. There's a woman who once asked me, I said, what could you do? Is there anything that you can do in your powers to maybe, you know, help those in a village somewhere or some? I said, but the problem is, even if you try, because of the way the structures are built, and you want to build a hospital, for example, you have to pass through a lot of chain in my country. That's where the problem is. Oh, you got to have this, you got to have this, you got this. And then in the end, you give up. You said, much as you want to do it, you're caught up. And that affects, that affects the kind of help that you want to
see,
do.
I think I don't agree with you.
Yeah.
I think that let me give you just one example, and then some other sort of issues. Look at the dam, the Great Grand Renaissance Dam that's been built on the Blue Nile by the Ethiopians. The World Bank wouldn't fund it because there was pressure from Egypt, because Egypt doesn't like the fact that it's taking water from the Nile. Well, it won't take water, but they thought it would. They put their hand in their own pockets. They took a levy from all the civil servants and a lot of money, and they built that dam themselves. The only thing they didn't build was the generators, which were provided by the Chinese, but even those they'll have to pay back. And that dam is going to be opened and ready and running
in a year's time.
No, in a couple of weeks. It's finished.
Really?
It's finished. It's ready.
Okay.
It's ready to work.
Yeah.
Now that is a huge achievement. Why is there not a similar dam on the Congo? There's one, a small dam, but the Grand Inga Dam, which has been on the drawing boards since before I was born, is never happening because of disunity. So, a place like Ethiopia, which has a pretty dictatorial structure, but still holds itself together, mobilized that money, they put their money in, it happened. And I think that you can look at lots of examples around Africa where, in Nigeria, there are people who've done marvelously well out of cement. There are lots of good.
There are lots
of
good. I'm not denying that. I'm not denying that. And even in my own country, there's lots of people who have come up and challenged the establishment to do. But the majority of them, they are Africans who have been so successful, and they have tried to help put something back at home. But like what I'm looking at is the establishments always have either corrupt people there who stand in a way every now and then and say, no, this is not going to happen. If it's going to happen, you've got to give me this amount of money.
No, they also want to eat.
Yeah, they want that. And then we look at it and say, why would I give you that amount of money when that money can go into the project? I've had a couple of Nigerians who are telling me they've gone to their villages and they tried several doctors. I don't know where they're from, Anambra State. One was telling me, wanted to come on my show, and was saying, we wanted 6 doctors in America, got together, we come from the same village, let's do something for our village. Then we went there, got the land, got this, and then the establishment starts coming and say, hey, what's going on here? I said, yeah, we want this. They said, no, you've got to come to us. Then documents started going from one end to another. I said, oh, you want money? You want money? We can give you money. But they don't want to say. So it's like they don't want the hospital to be built in that particular area. These are the things which annoy us, most of us. When we learn about them, we say, why does it happen? So sometimes maybe it requires...
You're absolutely right. But let's take another example.
Yeah.
You know that the money that is now sent back by the diaspora, African diaspora, is now bigger than all the aid money that is sent into Africa.
Yeah.
And it's sent by a nurse who works in France.
A sweeper.
Anybody, and they send the money back to their village. And it doesn't go through the politicians, it goes to their grandmother. Or their grandfather, or their brother. That money actually goes where it should go.
Yeah.
So I'm positive about that. That money will gradually grow, and there are other people who are doing lots of things. I mean, Ghana is an amazing place, Ghana. I think.
Ghana,
very effective.
I've had a lot of examples, and my boss is Ghanaian, so they're very proud of what is happening.
Marvelous
regardless
country.
of this and that, but I think Ghana is becoming a very good example to the rest of us. And we keep praying that they maintain that. The Chinese, any ideas what's going on now at the moment? They are coming in their numbers. Malawi practically is being laid by somewhere, somehow. I think they even have a police commissioner from Malawi in one way. So I was told. I just read about this. I don't know how true this is. Even in South Africa, there is a lot of that. Are they going to be a game changer, or they're going to be
Look, like everybody else who goes into Africa from outside, they will fail.
Yeah.
The only people who succeed in Africa, of course they will. I mean, the Putin and the Wagner group are going to fail in Mali, and they're not doing well.
Yeah.
Nobody can deal with Africa.
Yeah.
Africa belongs to Africans, and they will make Africa. The Chinese,
I like the statement. Yeah.
Yeah. The Chinese. Yes, they come on a different basis. They say we are also third world countries.
Yeah.
You want to build a stadium here, or you want a road from point A to point B from two cities?
We'll do it for you.
We'll do it for you.
Yeah.
But then what they do is they do exactly what you were signed up for.
Yeah.
And when it falls apart afterwards, they say, well, you didn't ask us for a contract to maintain it. That's your business.
How about lending us the money? And now the money is going back. They're taking places.
Of course they take money.
State institutions are disappearing slowly. Malawi has given away, I don't know whether they gave away the airport and they gave away something in order for them to recoup the money back. So there is a lot of that going on. And also languages replaced, the English language and other languages are now being replaced by Chinese. So,
but that's fine. I mean, people will learn one language and they'll forget another language. That's fine. In the end, there's only, Africa will control itself. Yeah. I have no doubt about that. Yeah.
The thing is, it probably won't be in our lifetime because
our lifetime is short.
Yeah, there's a big worry about that. We want things quickly. We're saying, look, let's deal with this thing and make sure that we want to be on the same standards like those here in Europe. So it's that which we can say, look, we've had the education, we had the people we've got the engineers, we've got the lawyers, we've got everything. But we've got the minerals, we've got everything. But what is stopping us?
Well, all the points that you made. Yeah. You're right to point out all the obstacles.
Yeah.
But the other half of that story is, and the thing that always makes me most optimistic about Africa is Africa's people.
Yeah.
They have marvelous people.
Yeah.
And you only have to go. I mean, everywhere I have ever been in Africa, I always used to say to people, the only one thing you must remember is you must listen to local people.
Yeah.
They will advise you.
Yeah.
And if you shouldn't go over that border or that river, the other side's dangerous, don't do it.
Yeah.
Be careful, and be respectful. But as long as you're respectful, I've never had a problem anywhere in Africa. I like African people, and I'd much rather work with Africans than I would with East Europeans who are always depressed.
I have to say, you're an African. You don't forget that. You're an African.
No. Well, some people would accept it, some people wouldn't, but I hope so.
Yeah, you are, because you're born in Africa, raised in Africa, if I should say, and you've done a lot of work for African. To us, you're an African.
Well, that's fine. Then that's fine. Then we have no problem.
Now, looking at South Africa, your country, you've seen the ups, the coming in of Mandela, the ANC, and of course Julius Malema, the parliament. We've been watching what is going on there. There is a lot of chaos left and right, but at the same time there is also a lot going on, which is in terms of development, which is quite good. But then the thing is that keeps worrying most of us, non-South Africans, is that there is a division over there to turn people against other Africans from other parts of the world. There was even used to be, a couple of years ago, last year, even somebody sent me something on WhatsApp when a couple of South Africans were actually abusing people from other parts of Africa. Say, look, we don't want you in our country. Why don't you go home, and so on. And we're thinking, well, hang on a minute, these people came, they were in exile in our countries. We never kicked them out. But now we come here, we have problems and so on. Now they're kicking us in, they got their freedom, and now how do you see this? Why should this be happening?
Well, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And I mean, some of the most shameful things are what happens to Africans in particularly, one particular group that is treated particularly badly, I think, are the Somalis.
Yeah.
A lot of whom are small shopkeepers. Yeah. And they're work,
just trying to earn a living.
They work all the hours that they are. They sleep in the shop. They work so hard.
Yeah.
And then because they charge cheaper prices than the some of the African shops next door, then people come and they burn them out and they take their goods.
It's their unity. It's their unity. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And the way they, I mean, look, there are problems with Africans, just as there are problems with everybody. I mean, for example, the Nigerians control some of the drugs smuggling
in South Africa.
And have done some pretty bad things. But then, you know, the South Africans tend to call them locusts. You know, they come and eat, and it's not nice. Look, I wouldn't accept it anywhere in the world. So that's just horrible. But it does happen. Yeah, it does. Now,
the political interest of Europe and Africa, ever since the slave trade, that is something that, of course, in terms of what Europe wanted, it got it developed and got all that. And there's a lot going on about repatriations. The Caribbeans are saying that.
They want reparations.
Yeah, they want reparations. The Africans have also started jumping on that bandwagon of that. When you look at these changes coming up, you think that will ever happen?
No.
It will never?
Well, look, the problem is that there was a calculation, I think it was in 1990, where they calculated that the debt that was owed and the interest was accruing was 1.7 quadrillion.
Quadrillion?
No, I don't know what a quadrillion is until I saw this.
Nobody has ever heard of that,
I think it's 1,000 billion.
Yeah.
It was, I think, 6 times the size of the whole American economy.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sorry, we're not. That's never going to happen. And you know, if you're going to ask the West for it, well, then why not ask the Saudis?
Yeah.
Do you know that the Saudis refused to allow academics to look at their archives about slavery? They closed their archives. That was their response.
Yeah.
You want to know something about slavery what the British did?
Yeah.
Go to the British Library. Go to the British archives. Yeah. It's all there. You can read everything you want about it,
but not about it on us.
But not in Saudi Arabia. So the Saudis closed it. They won't talk about it. You try talking about it in North Africa, they don't want to know.
Yeah.
And that is shameful. So, and then the problem is, if you're talking about African slavery, you take something like the Sokoto Caliphate, which existed for 100 years. The Fulani enslaved the Hausa.
Yeah.
Well, are you going to go to the Fulani and now say, well, we want reparations from you? Should the Sudanese go to Egypt and say, you've taken us for 5,000 years, we want reparation from you? Where do you end? It's insane. This is no way of doing it.
Yeah.
So I don't think the money can work. I think that we can all...
Even if it comes in installments, it still can't work.
It's never going to work.
Because the British...
The sums are so enormous.
They paid all the slave owners in America and even
paid every penny that the slave owners were owed.
Yeah.
Which was an enormous sum of money.
Exactly. And it took years.
It took years. They were paying off that debt. But don't forget that Britain also then put warships off west coast of Africa and the east coast of Africa for 60 years to stop slavery. The Royal Navy was in the Atlantic and in the Indian Ocean. They stopped 150,000 Africans from being transported across the Atlantic. About 20,000 in the Indian Ocean. And they tried to return them. How do you think Sierra Leone came about, or Liberia? Now, they caused a lot of problems as well, because they couldn't find where to take people back, so they just dumped them.
Because they didn't know which part of Africa they were coming from.
Exactly. So there's a lot of issues there. But I'm not... do you know that one Royal Navy British sailor died for every 9 African slaves that were freed?
That's something we're never told about. This is the thing. We need to get to grips with this as well and say that, okay, it happened. It happened, and there's a huge sacrifice that took place as well. So at the end of the day, we may start considering that, and we feel very humble that it did happen. But the thing is because it doesn't appear.
If you want an even more controversial issue, and this is not something I really want to go into, but if you want to take an even more controversial, do you know that the people, the pirates who were existing in North Africa, the Barbary pirates, they were called in Tunisia, Algeria, and Morocco,
Libya,
and in Libya, yes, they took 1.5 million Europeans to Africa as slaves.
Really?
Yes. They took 30,000 British people. They went as far as Newfoundland on the coast of Canada.
Yeah.
All of these things have happened. None of this is even controversial.
Okay.
There's so much analysis about it.
Can one Africa happen? Can one Africa, like United States, can it happen?
Well, I think it is about as likely as one Europe.
But one Europe is existing. It's practically, I mean, okay.
The borders are still there.
Yeah, yeah.
There are lots of divisions.
Yeah, well, you probably call those just states like United States, but the borders are practically, you know, they're not really.
Not really.
Other than the British who jumped ship.
I know, well, but there's a lot of problems. Look, I hope so. I hope that Africa will reduce the borders, reduce the customs. I mean, who is in favour of paying customs? I've forgotten what it was. There were like 20. If you wanted from Ghana to Nigeria, people said you had to pay 20 different people along the way to get there. Now, I mean, that's crazy.
No, we're already starting in East Africa. We're doing that. Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and you know, the surrounding countries that form the East and Central African Union, which, of course, if you buy something in Uganda, you don't have to pay any tax to take it to Kenya.
But great.
Yeah, then
that's what we should be
Tanzania
doing.
and so on. So at least it's working, and now they are talking of sports. But somewhere in the future, probably they will talk about the economical union as well. The currencies being discussed as well. Congo has agreed, and all the others have said, look, if we get the currency, I think the economical what of West Africa was trying to do something similar, but they didn't go far. But the East African ones are trying to make sure they put a deadline on that. Because we had, in East Africa, we had the East African shilling, which covered Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania.
It was a good idea.
Yeah.
But of course, there's one other that you've forgotten, which is the one group of people who never pay any tax on anything. And those are, for example, the cart or chat transport between Ethiopia, Somalia, Somaliland, Kenya.
Okay.
They don't pay nothing.
We've come to the end of the program, and I just want to thank you very much.
It was such a pleasure.
Coming and discussing this issue with us. I just want to say thank you very much for viewing us, and I hope we'll be together again next week for another edition of Africa Speaks. And thank you very much for viewing once again.